Hello and welcome back to the Soccerwhos podcast. I'm James and I'm joined by Lachlan. How you doing, mate? Ready for some YouTube video action?
I am very excited. I believe today we are choosing our 26-man World Cup squad. I've got the names in front of me. Some interesting ones. I'm excited to see who you've picked and who you think should be in this World Cup squad.
I know, it should be a good one. I'm interested as well. Of course, we're recording this right before Movember kicks off, and I'm excited for it. A World Cup in Movember. I'm hoping to see a lot of quality moustaches.
Yeah. Who do you think has the best mo in the Socceroos squad?
I mean, you can't go past Jackson Irvine, can you?
Yeah, he really is. And he's the sort of guy that would do Movember.
Yeah, he rocks it.
I think he seems like the most switched on to issues within society. No knock against other players, but
of course they put out recently, the PFA, I believe, put out a very good video highlighting some of the issues of having a World Cup in Qatar and migrant workers, and hats off to the players for that. It's
exactly.
class.
Exactly. Anyway, shall we get right into this?
Sounds good, mate. Of course, we're recording this on the 29th of October. I'll reveal that. So if injuries or, I don't know, sudden rapid changes in form happen, just know that, we didn't know. So let's get into it. Do you want to kick us off, and where do you want to kick us off? Say centre back, classic,
Centre
classy.
back. Why not start it in goals?
And goals, but I don't know, mate. There's some suspense around there. Nah, let's start with goals, mate.
Yeah. So in goals, two solid picks, I would say. Third one, bit of an interesting one. I've gone for Matt Ryan, who's going to start, I believe.
Just to clarify, that's not your third one as in your third choice goalkeeper.
No.
Okay.
Matt Ryan, Mitch Langerak is the backup, and someone who started off very well in the A-League this season, Lawrence Thomas.
I like it. Lawrence Thomas hasn't really featured recently in the Socceroos squad. Of course, with Andrew Redmayne's emergence as a regular, we have kind of seen a bit of a set list of goalkeepers recently that has only been disturbed with Big Mitchy Langerak coming back into the 4A. But almost a double change it feels like you've gone for in the goalkeeping department. Don't believe in Andrew Redmayne's penalty theatrics?
I think Andrew Redmayne is a fantastic penalty saver. But for me, when I pick a squad, I pick it on merit and I pick it on current form. And I don't think he has been performing at the level that we should expect of a Socceroos goalkeeper for about a year. He did something exceptional in taking us to the World Cup and saved those penalties. But outside of that, I just think that there should be a standard that our goalkeepers should be reaching, and I don't think he's been doing that at club level for quite a while. And I think that Lawrence Thomas has been doing a fine job, especially as a third choice keeper.
Yeah, I agree. For me and my selections, I think it's quite simple in terms of the first two. It's quite clearly Matty Ryan and Mitch Langerak fighting it out for the number one. It's getting closer and closer to the World Cup, and it seems like the difference between them of who should be number one is getting closer and closer. I'd still err on Ryan's side. I think experience pays off a lot of debt when it comes to lack of playing time. But it's the third choice goalkeeper spot that's really weird. I think we all know that it's going to be Andrew Redmayne, but for me, I don't think it should be as good as he was as a penalty saver. His career penalty save percentage is actually worse than Matty Ryan. So, I mean, apart from the mind games, I'm quite comfortable with Matty Ryan between the sticks when it comes to penalty times. But for my third choice, I've also gone for Lawrence Thomas. I think his start to the season in Western Sydney and his historical performance in the A-League, and also he's shown that he's decent in Europe, didn't really get the game time that he would have liked, came back to Australia and is showing why he's one of the better goalkeepers in Australia. And for a third choice keeper, I mean, it's nice. He's good. Obviously, I would have liked a younger option, but looking around, Ashley Maynard Brewer isn't really getting the game time that you need. I've kind of cooled on Thomas Glover. He's shown to be a bit too erratic and not ready in terms of his composure for a national team call-up. And players like James Delianov are still struggling with certain injuries. So I think Lawrence Thomas makes sense. I feel for Mark Birighitti. You made the move to Dundee thinking, oh, look, I'll make the move to Europe. I'll play in Europe and show that I should be going to the World Cup. And due to managerial merry-go-rounds, he's found himself on the bench, even though the player ahead of him between the sticks is performing well. And he's kind of lost his opportunity at the World Cup. So I feel kind of bad for him there.
Yeah. We picked the same three goalkeepers. Shall we move to fullbacks? Because I do know that when you are choosing a squad, you like to go fullbacks next.
Well, it's numerical order, right? You know, you got your number ones, and then you go number 2 at right back. So
fair enough.
I think that's a fun spot to go.
Who have you picked in at right back?
I think my number 1's easy. It's Fran Karacic. Even though he's struggled for game time a bit recently, I think what I've seen from him in a Soccerwhos shirt, but also historically, at club level, I think locks him in as my first choice goalkeeper. First choice right back. He's shown himself to be a very intellectual player. He's switched on, understands his positioning very well. And I think when you come to a World Cup where you need a lot of discipline in your positioning, especially when you come up against your, Kingsley Comans of the world, where you're going to have very flamboyant, tricky, clever wingers, your positioning needs to be on point. So I think Fran Karacic is my starting right back. I've only gone for 2 right backs. I don't think you need 3, as much as I'm sure Graham Arnold will be tempted to bring, I don't know, a certain Ryan Grant in as a third choice right back. And there's a few players. There's obviously Nathaniel Atkinson, but because of his injury and his almost subpar starts of the season because of struggling with illness and then with injury and not having many club minutes, I've actually chosen to omit Nathaniel Atkinson. I just don't think he's going to be ready, which is unfortunate. But he has a compatriot playing with him in Scotland who I think is above him in the pecking order, and that's Ryan Strain. I've gone for Ryan Strain because I think he was better against New Zealand for one, but also he's been lighting it up at club level over in Scotland. And I think at this stage, I think his form is better, and I think he's actually showing a lot of potential that maybe a lot of people didn't expect for him to show, and I think he deserves to go to the World Cup at the end of the day. A couple of players that were close. Gabriel Kleur, I think, has made a really good account of himself since coming back to Australia. He did very well in Serie C over in Italy and performed very well over there, but didn't really get the plaudits he deserved because, well, it's Serie C. Unfortunately, there isn't many eyes on that in Australia, but since coming back shows how good a player he is. And then Josh Rawlins, decent as well, but I just have to mention him. Gethin Jones as well. He's been all right over at Bolton, mate. He's been good. I love me some Gethin Jones.
There is no way that Gethin Jones... All I'll say is get out of here, because there's no way that he gets in above the players that you've said. There.
No, but I like to think that we'll see him one game for the Socceroos at some point. I just love a dual national, mate. What can I say?
I know you love a dual national, but there are some times where a player is a dual national, but they don't deserve to be called up to Australia. Just because they have another nationality doesn't mean that we need to cap them.
He's playing well for Bolton. Anyway, I digress. Fran Karacic, Ryan Strain are mine too.
Well, interesting that you've chosen those two, because I too have picked Fran Karacic and Ryan Strain as a bit of a backup. I think that for the exact same reasons that you've just said, Fran Karacic, for me, starts for this Socceroos side. And Ryan Strain, he might not have all the experience playing under Graham Arnold and adapting to whatever tactics he employs, because we know that that's a big thing. They don't really get lots of time with the players for them to learn how exactly Arnold wants them to play, which is why I think that he might choose Atkinson over Strain. But given that we have to make a decision soon, and given that Atkinson is touch and go whether he returns from injury, I think you're better off calling up Strain, who's done very well form-wise, and just take heart that Atkinson, there's years and years that he'll have, and probably at least 2 World Cups that he'll have a chance to play for Australia. So as much as it's disappointing for him now, I'd be looking at getting him involved in the Asian Cup, which is not that
100%.
not that long to go. So for me, Karacic, Strain, no backups there. If you were to take Atkinson, I could see you maybe taking a third choice right back.
Taking a Ryan Strain as well.
Exactly. But I'd rather use those 3 extra slots elsewhere.
Especially since we have injuries in other parts of the pitch as well.
Exactly. Left back?
Left back, number 1's easy, really, as is Bajic. It's his spot. It's his shirt. Joel King gave him a bit of competition at one stage, but I mean, Joel King isn't really playing football anymore at club level, unfortunately. So he's cooled right off for me. So yeah, Aziz Bajic is number 1. It's the next spot that's really hard. I think you only need to take 2 left backs as well. And there's a few players. Jack Iredale at Bolton. Gethin Jones' teammate, of course. I think he's been quite good.
Iredale is a better shout than Jones. I will say that, but still no.
He's had a good season as well. Gives you a bit of versatility as well, being able to play left centre back in a back 3, which is important in the tournament to have players that can be versatile, play different positions. And then you even have Callum Elder, who is good, has featured for the Soccerwhos before. You can stick with Joel King, even go Ben Garuccio. But ultimately for me, it came down between Jason Davidson and Alex Gersbach. And I've gone for the younger option of the 2 because we've got, as is there for the experience, I don't think we need a Jason Davidson there for more experience in a position where we've already got it. So I've gone for Alex Gersbach, who's playing consistently in League 2, and he's been very good over there as well. So I think he's earned it. He's been in and around the squad. He's cooled off a little bit once he struggled at club level, but now he's back playing regular 90 minutes, playing well for his club side, and I think he's earned his spot on the plane.
Do you know what? I agree with you. I've picked the exact same 2 in at left back. Davidson was that third choice for me. I think that Joel King has dropped off a little bit too much to be in consideration for me. As is Bajic and Alex Gersbach, the 2 options that I'd pick for the Socceroos.
There we go. Well, maybe we'll have some difference of opinion as we move to centre backs because there are some injury clouds and it kind of gets a lot more fluid after your first probably 2 choices at centre back. The natural one, obviously, it's the big name, Harry Souttar, right?
Exactly.
Is he healthy? Well, you can be the judge. Look up some Stoke City Academy games and he's playing football. So that's hard to say. For me, I think you have to take him, really. It's worth the risk. And that's why I think you take 5 centre-backs. I think that's when you use one of your 3 wildcard spots, as I'll call them. Obviously, usually in the World Cup, it's 23. This time, we've got 26 players. We've got an extra 3 wildcard spots, and I think Australia has to use one of those on a centre-back because of the uncertainty around Harry Souttar.
There you go. Who else have you picked as centre-backs? Who are the 5?
After Harry Souttar, I mean, Milstikinic has to be on the plane. And then I came to another injury question because the clear third choice for me is Kai Rolls, but he's recovering from a broken foot. So he's very much touch and go as well. And I think for me, I don't want to take 2 injury clouded centre back options. So I've decided that I wouldn't bring Kai Rolls. I'd pick between Harry Souttar and Kai Rolls, and I'd just pick the more talented player who is far more important for us, which is Harry Souttar. So I think Kai Rolls disappoints. And moving into my third option, I've picked a player very similar to Kai Rolls, but you have to make some phone calls because he's apparently unsure. It's LA Sicardi.
Okay, interesting. Who then is your 5th choice?
My 4th and 5th choice, because I've omitted Kai Rolls, is quite simple, I think. Thomas Deng playing very well. I bring him in. And controversially, I'm picking Gianni Stensness over Trent Sainsbury.
Interesting. Okay. Well, interesting. Well, okay. I have some very familiar names and some very similar names there. I've gone Souttar and Degenek. They're locks for me. I think you bring them.
Take the risk on Souttar.
That footage of Souttar, I'm not 100% convinced, but we still have a couple of weeks before the World Cup.
Yeah.
I agree with you that you take 5 centre-backs. because of the injury risk. Because of that as well, I have chosen Kai Rolls. I think he is one of, if not our best left-sided centre-back that we have as an option. He did really well in the qualifiers, pairing with Bailey Wright, and I think that you take him, and that's why you have a fifth centre-back in case there's an injury doubt over one of them.
But that leaves you with 3 healthy centre-backs potentially.
I think you'll have at least Rolls or Sutar getting to at least match fitness. I think that even if you only have 3 fully healthy centre-backs and 2 that are at 80%, I think that's a risk that I'm willing to take because I think an 80% Kai Rolls is better than what Trent Sainsbury served up against New Zealand. So that's just who I've gone for, Kai Rolls. I agree with you. Thomas Deng is a great option. He also has a bit of versatility about him. He can play at right back.
Yeah.
And I assume that if he can play at right back, if we're desperate, we could throw him in at left back as well. The difference between those 2 positions is not astronomical.
It's just comfortability, really.
Exactly. So Deng can fill in at right or left back if we need him to, but he's a very solid centre-back option. And I too have picked Sakati for the play. And I think, look, he's not getting as much game time as we might want someone to, but I think because of his potential, I think if we need to call on him, I think he can do a job.
He's getting regular enough starts for me for Palmer that would warrant him getting a call up and getting a nod even if he wasn't a high potential player. So combine it with he's a high potential player, I think you just have to take the risk and say, mate, come to the World Cup.
Yeah. Well,
feature for us.
Yeah, exactly. Only one player difference so far. I wonder how much we'll defer as we go into midfield.
Yeah, for sure. Midfield's an interesting one for me. I really had some easy players to pick and then kind of got a bit blurry. So for me, I'm bringing an extra midfielder than you would usually expect. I'm bringing 7 midfielders. And I'll go through my locks first, right? I think Cameron Devlin is on the plane, right? He's our 6 for me. Get him in. Aaron Moy, number 2. Get him in. Free 8. And pair him up, I think, with Jackson Irvine. I think that will be a very nice triangle. I think that is our starting midfield. And then I'm looking around at the bench options, and the hardest one for me is Aiden Hristich, right? Ankle injury, like Atkinson, but suffered a bit later than Atkinson, and apparently isn't set to be fit until the first game of the World Cup. Not going to play any football until the World Cup. And I think technically he's our best player, but that injury it's significant, and I honestly don't think he's going to be ready. So I'm chosen to omit him. Obviously, Graham Arnold has a few more days to mull that over. If he makes really positive progress in the next few days, you could see that decision for me flip. But time of recording, I just don't foresee him being ready for the World Cup, and I wouldn't bring him on the plane as things stand right now.
I don't disagree with you. I think that it's one of those really sucky decisions that you have to make. We've had it before with Tom Rogic. I think he's missed out on World Cups. I remember even back when Robbie Cruz was in his upwards trajectory in his career.
Yeah.
He missed out. It just, unfortunately, is the way that it is. And because you don't get as much lead-in time, you really need players that are fit and firing as much as possible right now. So I have made the tough decision to omit him, but in doing that, it paves the way for someone else to step up and maybe show what they can do. I've also chosen 7 midfielders. In no particular order. I've gone for Moy.
Yep.
I've gone for Devlin.
Yep.
I have also gone for Irvine.
Okay, so similar starting trio.
Then my other options, I think you bring Tom Rogic for the experience.
Okay.
He can impact a game off the bench at this point in time. He hasn't been playing full 90s for a little while, and I think even 60-minute Tom Rogic is an asset to this team. And he's not the same player as Hrustic, but he provides that creativity in the midfield that Hrustic would provide. So I think you bring Tom Rogic. Then 2 more players that are around that similar sort of position in my mind, at least within the standings of the national team. Riley McGree, I think you take him. He can play out wide if we absolutely need him to. I think he's better in midfield, but he can play out on the right if we have to. Keanu Bacchus has been really impressive for me. And the 7th player, similar to McGree, can play out wide if we need him to, can play in that attacking midfield role. I have chosen to call up Volpato.
I agree, mate. I think you take the risk. Hasn't played for the Australian national team before, but I mean, the talent's there, isn't it?
And when he was playing for Roma the other night in the Europa League, starting in the Europa League, and at that point, I don't care who you are, but if you're starting games in the Europa League, even if you're a fringe player at Roma, you're above an A-League player in my mind.
Oh, yeah. 110%.
So he's been starting, 1 game at least, in the Europa League, playing out as an attacking right midfielder, essentially. So we know that he can play in that sort of position where we might need him in the void of Aiden Hrustic.
110%. 110% agree. And his current trajectory, he could be, to be honest, the best Australian player come the Asian Cup. That's how quickly he is improving. And I think if he says yes, you take him to the World Cup, right? So for me, he's number 4 on my list. Rounding out the other 2 backups for me in the wild card, I too take Riley McGree. And I think he's just good. You take him along. And I take Keanu Bacchus quite comfortably. So that's my backup 3. I think I love Keanu Bacchus. We've gone over it many a time on the pod. Very good player. And this last spot was hard, to be honest. Because when I look at the squad and I look at the balance of the squad, you have 2 left-footed creative attacking central midfielders in Volpato and McGree. Do I want to take a third like Tommy Rogic? Or do I want to add another potential defensive midfielder? Because we've got Keanu Bacchus and Irvine, who are both very much box-to-box. We've got Moy, who is just insanely good at everything, really, but isn't a natural CDM. Then you've got Cameron Devlin, who is a CDM. So I really struggled with this position because do I take a similar player but an experienced leader in the squad in Tommy Rogic, who isn't playing much club football, or do I play someone that is playing regular championship level football that fits a hole in the squad in Kenny Dougal? And to be honest, I'm still not sure. Even as I'm speaking, I'm not sure. But my gut says you do the balanced option, I think, and you take Kenny Dougal. But that is a hard decision. Like, I do not envy Graham Arnold at all, because that would be one of the most gut-wrenching, difficult decisions to omit Tommy Rogic.
Especially at what could be his last World Cup.
Yeah.
And he missed out on the previous one through injury. So
yeah, I think it's very difficult. I think I could also see a world where Riley McGree's been dropped recently in club level. Tommy Ross should go for Riley McGree. So really between McGree, Rogic, and the balanced option of Kenny Dougal, it's really hard. For the sake of actually picking a squad, I would make the brutally difficult choice of Kenny Dougal for the sake of a balanced squad. But I mean, I'll be flip-flopping over that choice until the World Cup probably, because I mean, that's just the nature of how difficult that choice is.
I think because Kenny Dougal has traditionally played as a 6, but more recently he's been utilised in a system where it's essentially they've only got 2 midfielders. It's a 4-4-2. because he can play slightly higher up the pitch, he does provide a little bit of versatility that I don't think Tom Rogic does. I could see a world in which you take Tom Rogic, because I think he's been such a servant to the national team, and I think it would be the right thing to do by him. And you maybe drop McGree and you say, hey, mate, you've got more opportunities in the years to come.
Yeah, Asian Cup.
Exactly.
That's where you start to phase out Tommy Rogic.
Exactly. Interesting. So a near identical midfield for us. I've chosen Rogic. You've chosen Kenny Dougal. But the rest is the same. Will it be the same as we go forward? It sounds like to me that we at least have one wildcard spot left.
Yes, and I mean, it's the front court. It's the front three, right? And it's always an interesting one, the front three, because often there are two ways to think about it. There's your strikers and your wingers, or you have versatile players that can play all across the front three. And in keeping with that, I'm officially going to list him under my wing section, but he's a versatile player that can play at striker. Martin Boyle is first name in the team sheet for me in the wing position, along with someone that has been struggling for game time, Alma Bill.
Yeah, I agree. Martin Boyle and Awa Mabil, they are locks in this squad for me. Martin Boyle, I'm so glad he returned to Scotland. I'm so glad he returned to Scotland because
thank goodness
he might not be in this squad
if
he wasn't back in Scotland.
Because it was not working out in Saudi Arabia.
It really wasn't. I hope he got paid well, because I think he stunted his growth as a player by going there. He could be, I'm not saying a world beater, but he could be a slightly better footballer had he just stayed in Scotland.
Yep.
And Awa Mabil, once again, I don't think he's doing incredibly over in Spain. I'd love to see more from him.
Well, just playing more would be good.
Exactly. But I think that he is our best winger when you look at a true winger who has pace and can utilize that to the best of his ability.
Yep, I agree. And both players that can play striker if you need to. And for me, the first name off the bench can also play striker. I think you bring Graham Arnold.
Graham Arnold, he's also in my squad. I think that you can utilize him as striker if you absolutely need to, but I think he's, at this stage in his career, better utilized as a winger. We just saw tonight, just before we started recording this, he absolutely lit up that game against Western United. Wasn't directly involved in any of the goals as far as providing the pass that led to the goal, but he was involved in the lead up to all of Central Coast's really good chances that they had.
And the one that was closest to being directly involved, which had a deflection along the way, otherwise he would have gotten the assist. I mean, he absolutely skinned the defender, isn't he? Like, the balance of skill and speed. He's going to be exciting to watch this World Cup.
He will be. So, Kuel makes the squad for me. Who else do you have in your squad?
For my final winger position, I will say that I've chosen 3 strikers. It was hard. I think Daniel Zani hasn't done enough. Economides hasn't done enough upon returning from that ACL injury. Brandon Borello has done well, but is just too far off the pace to begin with, I think, to make up the gap. And Ben Falami has just, he's fallen off a cliff from his fall from last year. Much with Nicholas D'Agostino as well. So for me, it's really 3 players. Marco Tilio, young, left-footed, give you some balance in the wings, can impact the game in moments, but struggling a bit with confidence, I feel. Matt Leckie, not a winger, midfielder, to be honest, and you bring for the experience, and really that's it. He won't really impact much on the wing. I think that portion of his game is gone on the international stage. Mighty fine A-League player, might I say. A very good A-League player. Really a midfielder at this stage of his career because he doesn't have the pace anymore, but I just don't see him impacting the game internationally much on the wing anymore. But as an experienced player around the squad, could prove invaluable, especially because I omitted Tom Rosick and made that tough call. And then Craig Goodwin, who kind of gives you the best of both worlds, right, between the two, where he's not as good as either, I would argue. I think in terms of the left-footed, flamboyant skill nature of Tilio, he's not as good as him, but he's not as experienced as a Matthew Leckie, and hasn't been around the squad as much. But he's better than Leckie, I think, on the wing, and he's more experienced than Tilio, so he's kind of the in-between. So for me, I have shown, I think so far, I like balance in my squad, and I've gone for Craig Goodwin. That is a hard call, I think, between the three. They're all so close to each other, and I value experience, but I think I just cannot, on merit, select a Matt Leckie, I think, because of his, to be honest, horrendous form for the Soccerwhos for the last calendar year. He was half decent in the Peru game with his experience, but if I'm honest, I don't foresee the Socceroos having a high stakes game like that, because I don't think we're going to be in a position where, or we could qualify for the knockouts come the third game. So I've gone for the better player on merit for a wing position. Might I say a wing position? If we're talking about in the squad as a whole, yeah, I'd Leckie over Craig Goodwin easily. But for me, Leckie, and I've been saying this for a year now, isn't a winger anymore. He's a midfielder. That's where he's best. So I've gone for Craig Goodwin because I want a bit of experience in that spot still, kind of to keep a player like Graham Arnold accountable almost. I don't want him to feel like, oh yeah, I'm the better young guy. I'm better than Tilio. I wanted to say, oh no, I have to earn this because there's a very professional, very good winger who will be gunning for my position as a substitute wing player. So I think that composition is important, and being a left footer as well. I think I needed a left footer in my squad, and I just trust Craig Goodwin more than Tilio because he's been inconsistent in the A-League. He has been inconsistent with his minutes in the A-League. And to be honest, he's looked best in the A-League as a 10, which we don't play with internationally. So for those reasons, I've chosen to also omit Marco Tilio.
There you go. Well, I've already said I've got Boyle, I've got Mabil, I've got Kuol. Looking at players on the wing, I've chosen to do something that some might say is a little bit imbalanced. I've chosen only one out-and-out right winger. I've got Kuol listed as a backup striker, but he also can play on the wing. So Boyle is my only out-and-out right winger.
Okay.
I've got 3 left wingers.
Okay.
And I have done that because I think that if we need, Mabil can switch and play on the right-hand side. Yeah. I've got Volpato in my squad. I've got McGree in my squad, who are not fantastic choices out there. I think Volpato actually is pretty decent. But for me, I think they're better in an advanced playmaking sort of role in the middle of the park. My 2 backup left wingers are Goodwin and Tilio.
Okay.
I think Goodwin, for every reason that you've just said there, he provides experience. He's not going to set the world alight, but I think he's just that figurehead in the dressing room that he's played in important games throughout his life. And I think he is a better option at this point in time than Matt Leckie, at least when you're looking at wingers, if we need to have someone play on the wing. Yeah. Tilio, on the other hand, if someone said, hey, we're going to drop Tilio, I wouldn't have an issue with that. I think that a big thing for players is confidence. I think having the national team manager say, hey, I still believe in you. I still think that you have something to provide. I know his game time at Melbourne City has been patchy at best. I thought it was interesting that he started the other week against Melbourne Victory. He didn't do anything in that game that I thought was incredible, but I think having him in that squad as a player that is going to provide some X factor off the bench, I think at this point in time, he just pips Arzani for me. But I could see Arzani getting in instead of Tilio. And
interesting.
that is something that I kind of tossed around a little bit.
Okay. Interesting to hear that Azani's much closer to you than he is for me to that World Cup squad. For me, he isn't really close at all because I think Tilio and Lecky are far closer to that Goodwin spot for me than Azani is to either of them.
I'd much rather Azani over Lecky when it comes to their ability on the ball. I think if we've established that Mabil and Boyle are going to be starting matches, then the other wingers, you're going to be playing off the bench most likely. I think you could potentially start Goodwin if you really wanted to, but
interesting.
When you're looking at these players, I'm looking at players that are going to be able to sub on in the 50th or the 60th or the 70th minute and take the game by the horns. And I think that Tilio or Arzani, who isn't in my squad, or Kowal do a much better job of that than Matt Leckie will.
Okay, that's interesting. For me, merit is very important, and I just think between last World Cup and to this World Cup, Azani's inconsistency, yes, he's torn his ACL. Brutal. Sorry, that sucks. But he's returned. He's playing, well, he should be playing, but he hasn't, right? And how patchy his appearances have been, and now returning to the A-League, I don't think there's been enough consistent form there, I think, on a merit basis to reward him with a call-up. I think he was almost given a call-up a bit too quickly in that first World Cup. It's not like a Grant Kowal situation where, well, he's been insane. He's been impacting games. He's played international before the World Cup where he has changed the game and then has featured with the under-20s as well and did insanely well again. I think for those reasons, I think I wouldn't want to call up Azani because I don't think that is a fair reward for what he has achieved throughout this World Cup cycle as a whole, but also in the lead up.
And I haven't called up Arzani. He's still on the fringes, but I just look at Tilio over the last couple of games and his last appearance for the Soccerwhos, and I go, well, if you wanted to drop him, I wouldn't be against Arzani getting the call up. I also left of field, Iran Kunda.
Oh, wow.
If you're looking for another young player who wants to have an impact on the game, I don't mind seeing him being called up. I know that he is also part Tanzanian.
Yeah, I've heard you've had some troubles in Football Manager with that, mate.
I have. He, for some reason, wants to play for Tanzania. So maybe that's what's having an effect on my ridiculous decision to throw his name in the mix. But but he's very similar in my mind in the sense that just a player that you have in your arsenal who's going to provide a little bit of X factor, provide something different. And you throw him on with 10 minutes to go and you go, hey, mate, just go have fun. Go try and score.
Here's a question for you, Lachlan.
Yeah.
Take out the news of Graham Kowal signing for Newcastle United in the Premier League. And just think, in the A-League, Graham Kowal or Nestor Iran Kunda? Which one, do you think has had the better A-League resume so far?
Oh, I think apart from this year, because I think Garang Kowal has stepped up a little bit this year, even just in the game that we just watched this evening. I think that Iran Kunda has had a very, very good resume so far in the A-League. And I think that if you were going purely based off stats from last year, you could flip a coin and choose either one of them. I think that this is a big year for Iran Kunda, and I've said this before on the podcast, which you can now listen to wherever you get your podcast. But
good plug. Hold on.
I know, it's subtle. But I think he's still a while off getting a Socceroos call-up. But I also wouldn't mind seeing him in the squad. There's other people, though, that I think deserve a call-up over Iran Kunda.
I would really like to see Iran Kunda. Probably not in this World Cup. I think it's a little bit too soon. I think just those few months of life experience almost, and experience in the professional football world, Graham does pip him. But I would love to see, literally, as the World Cup ends, next international friendly game, get him in.
Yeah.
Get Aaron Kinder in. See if he can almost be ready for the Asian Cup.
100%. I think that he has a very bright future, and I hope...
He's almost gone under the radar because of Graham.
Yeah, 100%. So those are our wingers in the squad. You've said you've picked 3 strikers.
I have.
Who are they?
I've gone for a Graham Arnold favourite. He's not my first choice, but I think he's in the squad for me because he offers you something different. Mitchell Duke. Obviously, we've seen him. He's good. He's consistent. You get what you order. I mean, we know Mitch Duke, right? We know the player he is. I've gone also for a player that has had injury issues over the last calendar year, but I think his form prior to those, combined with his form afterwards at club level, warrants a reselection. And it's his Japanese league, at least, compatriot, Adam Taggart.
Okay. And third pick, I assume that it's none other than Jason Cummings.
No, I've gone for Nicholas Daggers. No, I'm joking. Jason Cummings, mate.
Yeah. So, I agree with you. I've only picked 2 strikers, technically. I've got Boyle, who can play at striker if we need it. I've got Kuol, who can step in at striker if we absolutely need it as well. Mabil could even potentially do a job at striker.
Played it a little bit there, yeah.
For me, Jason Cummings and Mitchell Duke, because of the way in which Arnold sets up. I think Adam Taggart and Jamie McLaren, and even D'Agostino, when we've seen him there, Fornaroli, they've all been way too isolated. I know that Taggart and McLaren like to play off the shoulder and like to try and get in behind. I don't think we're going to find success doing that against France and against Denmark, maybe Tunisia, but I highly doubt it. I think that we'd find more success in playing someone like Mitchell Duke, who a year ago, I didn't see why he was any use to an Australian squad, but I have come around to the idea that he actually is probably one of the best strikers we have under Graham Arnold. Yes. I don't think he's one of the best strikers we have talent-wise, but just in the way that Arnold likes to isolate the strikers for whatever reason, having someone who is a bigger frame, who can hold off a player if we need to, and he does press quite a fair bit. And he does like to try and win the ball back as much as possible. So
that's important in the World Cup where set pieces are so prevalent in these tournaments to have that bigger striker, that almost Olivier Giroud style striker that can have that impact on the game in that facet. I think Mitchell Duke does deserve to go on the plane as well. Yeah,
so Mitchell Duke, a year ago, wasn't scoring even at club level as well. And that's what really, I think, pissed me off, because I was like, why is this guy getting game time? But since then, he's
turned it around, hasn't he?
Managed to turn it around, and we know that he can provide at least something up top within this Soccerwhos side. Cummings, we're still yet to see that exactly for the Socceroos, in the sense that we've only really seen like a half of football from him.
Less than that, like 20 minutes, I feel like it was.
Yeah, it wasn't an incredible amount of football, but
it was very good.
In that amount of time, I thought he did exceptionally well.
Well, he's more of the deep lying forward, isn't he? He drops back into the midfield spaces to link the play together.
Exactly. And I think that that's what we need from our strikers, at least in this system that Arnold uses. We need someone who's going to help link the play. And he's got a little bit of mongrel about him as well, which I think we need. I know that Jamie McLaren has been scoring in the A-League. Yes, there have been some penalties.
He's always been doing that as well, though.
But exactly. He's been doing that for quite a while, and he then comes into the national team setup and
doesn't have the mustard.
He just disappears. And I don't think that's purely based on Jamie McLaren. I think that's a lot of the way that in which Graham Arnold sets up, because a player that I think is better than McLaren, even in Taggart, also seems to go missing in this system that Arnold uses. Whereas a player like Mitchell Duke, we know what we can get with him. A player like Jason Cummings, we know that he likes to drop in and link up the play, and he's been doing that a whole lot in the A-League this season and last season, and he also scores goals as well.
Yeah. I think, for me, I disagree a bit on Taggart. I think he offers you more than just that advanced forward poacher kind of player, because when I look at the difference between Adam Taggart and Jamie McLaren, Adam Taggart has an ability to see a last pass. When Jamie McLaren gets a ball in the box, there is one thing that Jamie McLaren is thinking of, and that's scoring, which is great for a striker. Don't get me wrong, but when you get to these trickier opposition games and really step up the level that they're playing at, and we've seen with Jamie McLaren that can hurt him. When he was in Germany, when he was in Scotland, he struggled really to create his opportunities because he didn't quite have the dribbling ability to make that single-minded nature work, but then he didn't have the passing nature to really open up the box to create better opportunities for himself later. When I look at an Adam Taggart, he has better vision, so he can influence the game a bit more when he's in the box. But in terms of build-up, I agree. He doesn't do quite enough for me. But off the ball, he's a very good presser, Adam Taggart. Jamie McLaren, he kind of just stands there waiting for the ball to come back to him. But Adam Taggart, he's an absolute dog at pressing. He'll run himself ragged. And I think with the goals he scored in J1, combined with that defensive pressing attribute, I think he deserves a place in this squad for me.
Yeah. I mean, if I was picking 3 out-and-out strikers, it would be the 3 that you've chosen. It's just that the way the squad composition has come about for me is I've just chosen...
No Alu Kual.
No Alu Kual, unfortunately, but...
No brothers linking up.
Maybe the Asian Cup. It's just that the way in which Arnold plays, we saw against New Zealand in that first game We saw against New Zealand in that first game at Suncorp Stadium. I think in the time that Taggart was on the pitch, there was only like 2 touches. It was something astronomically low. And this is against New Zealand, a side that very good, don't get me wrong, but a side that
not a France
we should be beating.
Yeah.
And when your striker only gets 2 touches,
not ideal.
It's not ideal. So that's why I've chosen Duke and Cummings. And I'll be honest, I expect that we'll only be playing 3 games in this tournament.
Yep.
And I think having 2 strikers, if there was an injury crisis and one of them goes down, you still have the likes of Boyle who can play in there. You've still got the likes of Kuol, who I wouldn't start, but...
I mean, it would be fun if we get to a point where we have no points in the first 2 games. I would love to see Graham Kuol start at striker.
Yeah, I think that Graham Arnold will try and win that Tunisia game. Even if we have no points in the first 2 games, I think for him, I don't know what the KPIs are for his...
Well, the rumor is right now it's if he reaches the round of 16, he triggers an automatic 4-year extension.
There you go. Well, that may be the case. If we have 2 losses, then I don't think we'll be able to qualify for the round of 16. I don't know the maths 100% off the top of my head, but I think that he'll want to do whatever he can to try and get a win even in that 3rd game. And so he should.
Oh, yeah. I'm not saying you don't play to win. I'm just saying you be brave, you play the youth, and you give them that really good 90 minutes of experience at a World Cup, and you play to win with the youth. That's all I'm saying.
Yep. So that's our 26-man squad. Some interesting choices in there. For the most part, largely the same for both of us. We'd love to know, though, who you have picked for your 26-man World Cup squad. Let us know in the comments below, and we'll rip into shreds.
Yeah. The big thing I want to know is, what do you think about the Matt Leckie decision and the Tom Rosick decision on my part?
There you go. And what do you think about me, Tilio Arzani, who comes off the bench for you at this World Cup? Am I an idiot for not picking a second natural right back? And, of course, those dual nationals, Saccardi, Volpato. do they deserve to be capped because of their high potential, or are we wasting time?
All right. Well, with all those questions to be answered and plenty more on the part of Graham Arnold, signing off here at the Soccerwhos podcast, of course, available now. Link in the description. We should have a good one coming up this week, shouldn't we, Lachlan?
What do you mean we should have a good one? Every episode
That's what I love to hear.
is better than the last one. So if you haven't listened to us already, if you have made it this far through this video and you go, do you know what? These guys, they've got their heads switched on. Then you can listen to us on our podcast, Soccerwhos Pod, wherever you get your podcasts. I officially called it Soccerwhos Podcast as opposed to the Soccerwhos Pod. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. We'll catch you next time, and we'll hopefully hear from you soon.
Goodbye.